Alright, welcome. With this video, what I'd like to do is go over some strategies, some tips and tricks with the Hamilton to ventilate an obstructive type patient. So obstructive, we're thinking asthma, COPD, bronchospasms, possibly an occlusion in the ET tube, a kinked ET tube, or even possibly too small diameter ET tube. So we're going to go over some things to help you guys ventilate these patients and get the vent set up appropriately. So we'll start out with the default. We got defaults to a male, 69 inch, 71 ideal body weight. And we're going to go with that. So first thing I would say is we can go to modes. We got different choices. So the APV CMV up here in the top left that most of you are familiar with. This is a adaptive pressure mode that targets the tidal volume that you give it. When I think of a healthy lung, not pulmonary related, this is the mode that I go to because it gives you a chance to kind of step back and take care of other things you may have, drips, IVs, other things not airway related. For sick lungs, the mode that I choose, it's also in the protocol, is the PSIMV+. This is biphasic, so the vent's going to do immediately what you tell it to do without any adaptivity. It's not going to use its own protocol in the background. I'll show you both modes, but we're going to start with the PSIMV+ first. So we're going to confirm. So a strategy for an obstructive we would all agree on would be a slow rate. So we're going to leave that rate nice and slow. We want an IE ratio. Right now it defaults to a 1:4. Let's adjust that. Let's take that to about a 1:3. It allows us for a little more inspiratory time, and it still maintains enough exhalation times because we're trapping air, remember, with this disease. Pressure. Your pressure and your PEEP added together are your peak. So let's start at 25 with your inspiratory pressure. So I automatically know right now that 25 plus 5 is 30. I know that my peak pressures are going to be right at 30, and we're not going to exceed that. With these patients, it defaults to a PEEP of 5. We could go down a couple with that, but we're going to maintain at least a PEEP of 3 for minimum. I'm going to take this down to 21% because I'm not connected to the aircraft here. I don't want to drain the O2 off of that. And we're going to get alarms, obviously. So this is a pretty good strategy right here. IE ratio 1:3. So that's inhalation to exhalation. We're at a slow rate. We're at about 12 a minute. Inspiratory time's good, 1.25 seconds. Let's just go ahead and start here and see what it does. So how do we know this is an obstructive patient on the Hamilton? Well, we'll give this a second to feel the pressures here, but with an obstructive patient, we would expect to see the R-insp, or resistance to inspiration, above 15. A normal resistance is 10 to 15 on the Hamilton, and an obstructive patient would be anything over 15. So like 16 to 33 roughly indicates an obstructive airway disease. So I want to go over the waveforms, give you a quick heads up on what these are showing you. The top is our pressure, so we can see that we're not exceeding the 30 because this blue line across the top is 30. So we're going right up to 30, we're not exceeding it, and then we're coming back down and we're maintaining that PEEP of 3. That's why we're not making it back down to this neutral line here. Next we're going to look at flow. So inhalation above the line, exhalation below the line. I can see that this is returning all the way to this neutral middle line before it initiates the next breath. What does that tell me? That tells me that I'm allowing that patient to fully exhale before the next breath is triggered. And in fact, if you look, there's a little bit of space in between before it initiates the next breath right here. So that tells me that I can actually increase the rate slightly. So let's go and let's increase this rate to 14. Once we increase this rate to 14, we'll go back and we're going to look. And we should see these on this flow waveform slightly closer together. And we just want to make sure that we're not going too fast and trapping any air. We got good tidal volumes that are appropriate for this patient of 71 kilos. We got a good expiratory minute volume, and right here we could leave it right here and not do anything, and this would be just about perfect for this patient. I'm going to show you what it looks like to trap air. So we're going to go into controls so you can see what you're looking at. Let's take it up to about 24. You know, you take the rate up because you want to blow more CO2 off. Notice that once I take the rate up, it changes my IE ratio. So you have to realize that changing the rate changes that IE ratio. Now it's a 1-to-1. Okay? So let's just say we increase the rate like that. And I want to show you on your flow waveform, inhalation above, exhalation, and before it makes it back to this neutral line, it's triggering another breath. So that's trapping air and that's causing auto PEEP, and that's harmful to the patient. So how do you correct that? You take your rate down. Anytime you're trapping air, decrease the rate. So let's go back down to about 14. Back to neutral before the next inhalation. So we're not trapping any air, so that's good. Back up to our pressure waveform. If you look at your top left-hand corner, you can see it's slightly rounded off. We can get that air in, we can deliver that breath a little quicker. So we go to controls, we go to more, and we look at the P ramp right here. It defaults to 70 milliseconds. So if I decrease that number, that means that it's forcing that air in to that pressure that I set quicker. So it will square that off more. That means we're getting to that pressure quickly. Now I'll show you what it looks like real quick just to overshoot that. If you overshoot it, let's go down to 0 to the extreme. You'll see a little little rabbit ear on that top left hand corner, a little point. That means we're overshooting. We're forcing that air in too quick. So the default was 60, and most of the time you won't have to worry about this. That's pretty close to where it needs to be in most cases. So you'll see nice squared pressure waveform. So one width here, and there's approximately 2 of those in between, roughly. So without even looking at the controls, you can tell that we're pretty close to a 1-to-2 ratio, 1 to 1.5 maybe. Yeah, 1 to 2.5. So that's a good rate. So how do we tell that we're in obstructive? Remember, resistance to inspiration, RINSP. It's on the 3rd tab, so we're at 28. Remember, normal is 10 to 15. Anything above 15 is suggestive of an obstructive disease pathology. Okay, let's go to the APV, CMV. Remember, this is adaptive. So let's go to this mode. Click confirm. Okay, so we're still at 14 breaths a minute. What were we at for our IE on the other one? We were at a 1 to 2.5. So let's take that to a 1 to 2.5. So we're apples for apples. And tidal volume would be appropriate there. So let's click confirm. Let's take that down to, 560 would be about our max tidal volume for around a 70 kilo patient, which is where we're at. So right away you can see that the tidal volume has dropped off, the expiratory minute volume has dropped off, and the vent is doing its own little work in the background to try to figure this lung out. And this is one of the issues that you may run into with this, is that this mode has a tendency to have issues with the peak pressures. It will have higher pressures trying to maintain a tidal volume. With the APV-CMV, like I said, your pressure plus your PEEP is your peak pressure. We're not trapping air, so it's doing a good job timing itself here. We can decrease this tidal volume even more since we're over pressure. But again, we're also decreasing tidal volume. So if we got to blow CO2 off, this would not be wrong to use this mode, especially if you're comfortable with it. But I would suggest, especially with these pressures, I would suggest going back to your PSIMV Plus with the P-Sync. And I think that's about it. So that's our strategy for obstructive. Low rate, slow rate, allow enough time for exhalation. You gotta allow that trapped air to exhale. The other way that you could tell if you were not comfortable reading this flow waveform would be to go into your monitoring, go to page 3, and look at your auto peep. That auto peep will tell you if you're trapping air or not. And that's all I have for obstructive. Thanks.